All right, hey everybody. So what we're going to talk about quickly is GitHub Actions. So first and foremost, what is GitHub Actions? It is a way of automating workflows. So I would recommend that you all look at the official documentation and read a little bit of how GitHub describes GitHub Actions. But essentially what it enables you to do is you create a configuration file inside, oops, sorry about that. You create a configuration file inside of your GitHub repo that explains or tells GitHub what you would like to run and when you would like to run it. So as an example, we could create a GitHub action configuration file that specifies a specific Python script or a Python file that we would like to run every day at 1 p.m. or every 30 minutes, or once every 12 hours, or once a week. And that typically is called a cron job. Some type of process that we have running on a reoccurring schedule. So that's essentially kind of like what GitHub Actions allows us to do, whether it's a specific file that maybe pulls down data from a database, or in the example that I'm going to show you, which I thought is kind of interesting, is hitting the PubMed API and looking for new digital health articles, and then it automatically sends us an email daily of whatever the new articles are. Now, PubMed already has that type of service built in, but what we're doing is kind of reproducing or replicating that existing service. All right, so inside of our 504 project for the course, I've shared some example code with you guys that you could sort of copy, and I'll sort of break down what it does sort of here bit by bit. So first off, how do we configure a GitHub action? So inside of your existing repo that you'll then be submitting for the homework, what we do is we first create a new folder called GitHub that begins with a dot or a decimal. So you would right click, new folder, and then start with a period and then say GitHub. And then inside of that repository, we'll create another subfolder called workflows. So inside of that subfolder workflows is then where we can create what we could call it's called a YAML file. You could think of it like a configuration file. The language is kind of somewhat similar to like Markdown, or like a key value pair, where if I were to open it up here, this is kind of what the file looks like, and you guys can copy and paste this, because this is sort of what the configuration file would look like for running a GitHub action. So you could call this whatever you want. I decided to call it PubMed_update, but as long as this file is under or nested within .github, and then another folder, workflows within GitHub, it doesn't matter what you call this thing. You call it whatever you want. I decided to call it PubMed update because that's kind of what it's doing. Now, inside of this file, a very basic version kind of has like 3 different things within it. You have the name of it, and again, I'm kind of just giving it the same name. So the name of this action, PubMed update. And we could also do a scheduling, so sort of on like when do we want it to run. And we have 2 different options here, and there's actually maybe 1 or more others. But the 2 that I want to show you is we could either run it on a schedule, or we could include a button within the GitHub action panel to manually trigger this code to run if we so want to. So the schedule piece here with cron, so this kind of funky looking code here is the syntax of a cron job. Cron tab is a nice little resource that I would recommend that you guys check out, where here, let's see, uptime, cron jobs, examples. They got some nice examples here of like, all right, do we want to run something every 5 minutes, every morning, every day at 8 a.m., every Tuesday, every Friday, say every Friday at midnight, right? You could sort of click into this, and then it's going to give you some pretty nice examples of how often you want it to run. You could also do this in Copilot or ChatGPT or one of the large language models. guaranteed that all of those LLMs will have this in there and very easily able to respond to whatever your request is. So what I have here is to run once a day at midnight. So this looks like 05 star star star. Now the next part here is jobs. So we could then have multiple jobs. We could have multiple steps to a job. But what this is essentially doing is it's creating a virtual environment. So that's something that is no longer novel to us, right? We've now been working with virtual machines for a little bit. So what we're saying here is we're giving it a name, run data pipeline, and then we're saying that we're going to pull down an image of Ubuntu, and then we are going to do a couple things. So actions checkout, this is a specific pre-configured code that enables actions to run. And then there's a separate action for installing Python on that operating system. And then here we could choose the version of Python and how we want to install things. And then finally, we could then also have another command down here for installing the requirements that are needed for this package to run. Because keep in mind, for our code to run, because keep in mind, this is a fresh operating system, right? That is getting spun up and will be destroyed afterwards. So since it's a fresh operating system, we need to make sure that we install the necessary packages for our code to run. So here then we have our pip install -r requirements. And then finally down here is then where we're actually running the Python code. So for each of these, right, we're giving a human readable name, check out the repo, install and set up Python, install the dependencies, and then here we're actually then running the little Python script that I've come up with. So right here then we're then providing the location of where this code exists. So first we're saying how are we going to run it? We're going to run it using Python, and then this is then the directory that contains the script that I want to explicitly run or execute here. So it's under other, module 5, and then I created this Python file called PubMed GitHub Actions. So if we go inside of this, just to quickly show you what the code looks like. This is what the code looks like. So we have the requests library to send a HTTP request to the PubMed API. We're using pandas to then also parse and then kind of create a data frame of the returned PubMed articles. We're importing in the OS package. We're also importing in a package called a resend. Resend is an interesting tool that I just found just for the point of this exercise that helps us very quickly send emails. So if you go to resend.com, what it is, if I were to log out here quick, how do I log out? Probably down here, log out. Email for developers. Best way to reach humans instead of spam. So essentially they have a Python package that enables you to automatically send emails to a email address. Really the only limitation is when you sign in or when you sign up, and since everyone here now has GitHub repos, right, you could just hit the login with GitHub, and then what that is going to do is it's going to create an account for you. And the main thing that you'll want to get if you want to try and replicate this on your own is you want to go down here to API keys and then create an API key and then copy and paste whatever that token is, because that's then sort of what we use to trigger the email. All right, so that's what resend is. It's just another Python package for sending emails. And then there's one configuration part here, and this should be now also familiar to you guys, right? Where we're loading in a specific key value pair from an environment file called resend API key. I'm not going to open up my env in this example, or let me just actually block it out very quickly and I'll show you. Just 1 second. All right, so this is what the environment file then looks like. I've cut away the rest of my API key, but this is what the .env file looks like. It starts with resend_API_key, and then I copy and paste over the API key. All right, so now going back to this view, I wrote 3 different functions. I'm not gonna use this video to explain them. I'll let you go through. But essentially, what the first function does is it goes to the PubMed API and searches for a PubMed term. It then fetches the individual articles because the first search PubMed here returns IDs of individual articles. Then we have a second function to then get the metadata associated with the articles. And then a third function to then convert it into a data frame. So then ultimately, once these things get run, is we could then insert in a mesh term, digital health as an example, and then we could run the last function, PubMed to data frame, insert in the mesh term, there's this max retry, and then what that then does is it returns a data frame of the last 10 articles. And then the last part here is like, all right, once it then gets it, well, let's then send a copy of the data frame to my own personal email. When you sign up with Resend and for testing purposes, you could only send emails to the email address that you have registered with whatever account that you've signed in to Resend with. So because I signed up with GitHub, it's then taking my own personal email, and I could then only send emails to my own personal email. You can't send them to any other email other than your own personal email. So you could use from, you could call it whatever you want. Subject came up with PubMed API digital health articles, and then in the body of the email, the pandas data frame has the ability to convert a data frame to an HTML table. So then that's sort of what we're doing here. Again, these are all functions that you guys can then sort of look up on your own as well. And then finally, send to email, and that's that. So I have never used Resend, but again, their documentation is like quite good. We go in here, quick start, we go down to Python. And then this is it, right? It essentially gives you a very quick little cookie cutter script that you could potentially use. Okay, so what this then looks like, right? So let's now try and sort of push this, and I'll sort of show you what this then looks like when we go into the actual repository. So now, because this was under 504, let's go in here. So under this view, there's this Actions tab that we have not talked about yet. But if we click in here, and this is because I was just testing this, when you first start, this is going to look blank. But on the left-hand side, this is the name that we gave it. So if you hit this, and then we could also then see the name of the file, our sort of action file. So if we click in here, right, this is essentially what we were previously looking at. So now this is going to run at midnight every single day, but because in our GitHub YAML file here, we included this thing, workflow dispatch. What that gives us when we click under this PubMed is this button, this run workflow. So when we hit this, this is kind of where the magic happens. So now if we hit run workflow, use workflow from main, sure, and we hit run workflow. What this is going to say, workflow run was successfully requested. Then if we were to refresh this page, we now have this running job. And then if we click into here, right, what it's then doing is it's setting up the job, and this is working very quickly, setting up Python, installing the requirements, and then it's going to try and run the PubMed script. Here's the articles that it returned. And then it cleans up the job, which is essentially just removing the virtual environment, and then it's done. So this then successfully ran within 15 seconds. Now, if I go into my email, let's see. We should be getting, oh, looks like the run failed. That's strange. Looked like it was successful here. Let's see. Oh, did I not push these changes? Let's just double check here quick. Oh, and then the other thing that I forgot, since I added this, so let me just show you first that it's running locally fine. I believe what I forgot to do was inside of our YAML file. When we're running this, we need to also specify the sort of environment key. So then when we are running this, it is able to successfully execute. Okay, so this is kind of like within the environment file, and then here, this is sort of one sort of additional piece that we need to add in here. So to this repository, or to wherever we add in the repository, when we go to settings, we could go under secrets and variables, actions, and then what we could do here is we could add in a environment secret. So what we're going to do here, actually just add it into the repository. So the secret name here that we're going to set is the resend API, and I'll change this since I'm now sort of viewing it here, but I'll change it afterwards. Add our secret there. Okay, so now what this is going to be able to do when the GitHub action runs, it's going to be able to pull the secret, because it can't find the .env file because we don't actually save that or persist that to github.com, right? So then the question becomes, okay, well then how do we then still provide some, environmental variable? And that's where, for the repository, we go under settings. We could then go to secrets and variables, actions, and then under repository secrets, just view it as an environment file, and then we could add it in there. Okay, so now let's try and rerun this, because once this runs, there sort of should be an email that gets kicked off. So we can see right now under my email with thousands of unread messages that there is no email with the PubMed stuff yet. So let's now try and rerun this, and let me just make sure that everything has been pushed. Okay. So now if we go back under actions, let's now go back here and run this workflow again. Refresh, and this should be quite quick, right? The last time it only took 15 seconds. So we'll just give this a second. So automatically setting it up again, great. Installing dependencies. Running the script. Okay, perfect. So there's our, these are the different articles. Now it's cleaning up. Now let's go back to my email, and voila, right? At 9:10, just a couple seconds ago, this is the data frame that's been converted. So these are the articles that just got pulled from PubMed that have a mesh term flag of digital health, shaping adoption and sustained use across maternity care, or maternal care, critical elements, digital health and diabetes, digital health for Alzheimer's, etc. So that's it. So the key things here, if we're going to be using, say, a environmental variable, we need to make sure that we load that environment variable under settings, and then under secrets and variables, and then actions. So there's other things here, right, that we haven't talked about. Well, you guys have used code spaces a little bit now. Then also Dependabot, that's something slightly different that checks for sort of package updates and security issues. But actions is where we want to go if we have a environment secret that we want to have the action incorporate. All right, so for your guys' homework, right, create a sort of .github and then folders workflow within it, and then give this a shot. All right.